Hello, welcome to SocTalk with JNAB and the Sundance Kid. We are going to explore the frontiers of technology, art, and the human experience. Hello, welcome to SocTalk, episode number 6. Thank you for tuning in with us this week. We've got a lot of fun things to talk about today, and to kick us off, I'll pass right over to John.
Thanks, Jamie. Really glad to be back here with you again. Today I was hoping we could talk about something that I witnessed earlier today. I was virtually attending a seminar over at the Aarhus Institute of Advanced Studies, where my friend and colleague, Dr. Lucas Esterle, was talking about trusting machines. And the very excellent group that was hosting him over at AIAS ended up in a discussion more about the meaning of trust and whether you can actually trust a machine or trust a tool. And it was interesting. It was a direction I don't think Lucas had anticipated, and it certainly wasn't one I had anticipated in planning to attend the talk. But I really wanted to get your take on that. Is there a difference between the kind of trust you have in a person and the kind of trust you have in a thing? And does a computer or a robot or an AI fall more into one camp than the other?
Well, all right, start with that thought. How do you build trust? I guess it's like anything in reality. If I'm going to be climbing a tree, I'm going to reach up to grab a branch. I'm going to wiggle it a bit, slightly put my weight on it. And if I feel that actually it's going to hold my weight, then I'll commit to potentially endangering my body and life because I'm now comfortable that it will hold my weight.
Right.
And I see that as a methodology, it's probably not too dissimilar where I put trust in other things in my life, even with people. You know, you meet a stranger on the street, you can get a good vibe off of them, but you're not going to give them your car keys and say, drive my car home or whatever.
Right.
You're going to need to build that trust. Now, that being said, there could be institutionalized trust. So if I went to a rock climbing wall, I forget what it's called, bouldering. If I went bouldering, I would probably just trust that the safety precautions have been there and they've got everything drilled in right. And I'm not going to need to check my weight every single time. And you trust my fingers probably because they're not very strong. But I wouldn't have the same methodology as a branch. So that being said, in that example with the car keys, if there's a valet service at a very expensive hotel, sure, just straight away hand that over. So that's my immediate thoughts. Now with machines, I guess it also comes with what it is, how many times I've used it, what company it is, and those levels of institutionalization, how they operate, and how much I am willing to firstly know about them. How much do I know about them? Where does that fall in with my knowledge? And yeah, if it's out with my knowledge, I'm going to do the branch method. I'm going to slightly put my hand on it, shiggle it a bit, and see how much I can trust it.
That makes perfect sense to me, and that's not the direction the conversation went in at the seminar this morning. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I now want to start asking more and more people about this across different fields. We've established, I think, long since that you and I think in similar ways, and so maybe it's no surprise that we agree on this. But the example you gave is almost identical to the one that I gave. I had to put up my hand to ask a question, and then this wonderful discussion happened. So instead of asking a question of the speaker, of Lucas, I asked a question of the audience, which was, are you all sitting on chairs? Did you verify that they worked before you decided to trust them? And the response was, that's not trust. And part of it, I think, was the dynamic of different understandings of English. So most of these folks were not English first language. And there's always the realm of, I don't want to say teacher error, but language drift across dialects and across versions of language. So there's that possibility. But I don't want to use that to discount the possibility that the take that you and I think Lucas had is very mechanistic, and maybe there's a more interpretive, social, sort of experiential version of the interpretation. Because the take that was repeated by several people was essentially, trust is a feeling. And because a device can't have feelings, maybe trust can't be had from the device or for the device, which I have a hard time with the idea. We trust in devices. You trust the buttons on your jeans to stay closed once you've closed them. You trust your shoelaces to stay tied some of the time. You trust the street you're driving on not to cave in. But yeah, there seemed to be a very strong impression that trust had to involve a feeling and it had to be between people. And
I guess
it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. I mean, if I was to strip it back to its raw components, ultimately I'm looking at it as confidence in an action, a set of inputs and my confidence that the outputs will be what I need them to be.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what system that is, if it's a person or a system or a road.
Right.
I have an expected outcome and a confidence level of what that outcome will be.
Right.
That is, to me, what it seems to be if you break it all down.
I agree. And I guess the distinction that people were making, or that a couple of people were making, was that that's reliability.
Okay.
But that's not the same as trust. And to me, the only difference between reliability and trust is that reliability is the state.
Yeah.
And trust is how you feel about it.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
But then suggesting that how you feel about something means that it's emotional and has to involve things with emotions means that you can't have feelings about your favorite car. You can't have feelings about your favorite apartment or flat. You can't have feelings about your favorite color because they don't have feelings to have back at you.
That seems silly.
It does, doesn't it? I know it's an argument reductio ad absurdum, but I couldn't get past that. And I wish we could have some of those folks who were talking that way about it.
To defend their positions that were...
Well, to defend their positions or explain where I'm misinterpreting them in my explanation. I mean, I should point out, these are people at a fantastic Institute of Advanced Studies. These are people, I have no doubt that every single one of them has better rational skills than I do. And I'd love to better understand what they were saying. Unfortunately, it just wasn't there in the context of that discussion at that time to be able to ask them about it. I guess I could have been really challenging and insisted on shouting through the microphone, but that hardly seems the way to have a discussion.
If I was trying to maybe go in a position and maybe counter or think about this in a different way, trust, I guess, isn't completely logical because you can trust in wrong things, and humans are very good at that, placing trust in wrong areas and dealing with consequences. So in that way, it's not objective and subject to all of humans' silliness.
Nicely put. I agree. Yeah. False confidence over trusting yourself, trusting others, and then paying the consequences for it afterwards. We've all experienced those to some degree. At least I think we have, thanks to the Dunning-Kruger effect. We know that little period of false certainty that we've all experienced.
Yeah, like podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure we can do this.
Yeah, we can do this. Fine.
Heck yeah. What do you guys think? Can we do this? Let us know in the comments, unless they're really vitriolic, in which case, keep them to yourself. Yeah, anyway, I thought it was a fun topic to get into a bit. Maybe in future SocTalks, we'll have further opinions about this to share again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, though. I'm pretty sure we can have feelings about things that don't have feelings for us.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. Especially if you're a child. You grow up and the world is full of agents. Even though they're not agents, you have a whole repertoire of toys. And Toy Story is a fantastic film because it is the subjective experience of children, really. That is, all of these toys have subjective agency. When you're not looking, they'll run around and do things, but you don't need them be not looking. And your mind and imagination, they are agents doing real things. And there's a lot of emotion for those agents. You can like some more than others. And yeah, you're going to deny childhood then if you're going to say that you can't have emotional feelings for objects. My first car, I still love my first car. I've got a lot of fond memories of it.
Exactly. And I think that's universal, or close to universal.
Yeah, it's why we name ships.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Why we name ships, why we have our favorite knife in the drawer that we like to use more than the other knives, our favorite seat in the room that we like to sit in more than the others. But the fact that it's so obvious to you and me makes me think that I've misrepresented what they were saying. And if any of you who are at the talk are watching this now or listening to it and feel that I am misrepresenting you, wonderful. Reach out and let us know how wrong I am and in which ways. Please.
To continue on this line, trust in things. There's an element of knowledge that you need sometimes to feel comfortable with things. I don't know, I'm going on a complete caveat spin here that my brain just came up with. There's that element of sometimes a little bit of knowledge does more harm than no knowledge at all.
So a little bit of knowledge is worse than a lot, because what you're doing then is you're working on an incomplete mental model.
Yes.
And if we go back to the Dunning-Kruger curve, the idea of Dunning-Kruger fallacy, the ability to believe that you have a complete mental model built from a tiny amount, it's like the story of the 5 blind men, or the 5 people in the dark room who are asked to describe an elephant. And one feels the trunk and says it's like a snake, and one feels the ear and says it's like a screen. Oh no, says the one feeling the tusk, a trunk is like a spear, and the one feeling the leg says an elephant is like a tree. So they all have this idea of what an elephant is.
Yeah.
And if they just spoke with each other, they could come up with a joint picture. But the whole point of that story, and the whole point of the Dunning-Kruger effect, is that you don't do that. When you have a tiny amount of information and you imagine all the rest of the structure, you almost inevitably create illusions that you buy into until reality proves you wrong.
Yes. That I like that. Little story is also just investigating reality itself.
Yeah.
All the scientists have their own tools and methods of objectively observing things, and then they can hopefully always sometimes coerce, but you can end up with quite different interpretations of the same thing.
Yeah, it's a lovely metaphor, isn't it? I feel that way strongly about that story too, because I've heard versions of that story from a lot of different places, and they claim that it comes from this source or from that source, and instead of being adamant, why not look at each other's sources and see if maybe there was a common source that's earlier.
Yeah. There's another, to stick with trust, there was, I remember seeing a talk by the philosopher Daniel Dennett, and he began the talk with a phrase written in another language on the board. And he said, my friend insists, I don't speak this language, but he completely insists that this phrase means that on the board here. I don't speak the language, but I am completely willing to trust him and say that this here is what it means. And his whole point was about that we can't, there's a lot of, especially now, there's this attitude that everyone has of do your own research, as though individuals with a podcast or something else are going to be able to go out in the world and deduce everything, and we can't trust anybody, we can't trust any institutions, we have to go out and do our own research, which is I think very, very damaging to society when people with large platforms say, I did my own research and I did this and this and this. You have a lot of climate change denials, prime example of that, people just saying, well, they've been wrong about this or that. It's like, you've not studied the science, you don't even know where to start with the science.
Right.
And there's that level of professionalism in institutions which exists to be trusted and should be trusted. Now, there are ways that the institutions can go wrong and do make poor decisions, which can lose trust. But ultimately, we still have to have a fundamental society where we can trust academic rigor. And there are a lot of people throughout the world that even don't understand the weight of what they should be doing has on society in terms of academic rigor in general. Just like you should be taking it seriously. It took us a long time to establish the scientific method. We take it for granted now, so much so that people will abuse it to justify any decision that they want, rather than being humble and objective to reality.
Yeah.
And the more people that fully understand what proper academic rigor is, the more trust society can have in the objective findings of it.
I agree completely. I was having a conversation last week with a very intelligent person, a new acquaintance, who said to me that one of the problems with science is that the scientists go out being absolutely certain about things and then get proven wrong. And I had to explain to them that that's not the perspective of science. Science is, like you were just saying, science is humility. Science is the acknowledgement that we are all wrong about everything, but we're building temporary models that are the best we can build. And we're using them with the understanding that they will be disproven in time, possibly in the next few minutes, possibly in the next few centuries. But a real scientist goes out with this idea that I am building on the knowledge of others, standing on the shoulder of giants, and I'm doing my best to establish this and to advance it. But I will be disproven. And I think this really surprised the person I was talking with. They seemed to be quite certain that scientists were quite certain. And I thought it was a lovely simile for that problem, and it falls into exactly what you were talking about. If you haven't been trained in the scientific method, and most people haven't now. 50 years ago, most people were being trained in the scientific method in school. Now most people are not. And even now, when I talk with school children, when I talk with undergraduate students, I find out that they haven't been taught the right scientific method.
Yeah.
So Karl Popper changed the scientific method drastically in the middle of the 20th century when he said what you have to do is you have to try to disprove rather than prove. Don't take out your ideas and say, this is my theory, I will prove it. This is my hypothesis, I will prove it. Instead, inverse that. This is my hypothesis, so I will do my best to disprove it. And if I fail to disprove it, then maybe there's something going on here. So I will publish, not to say to the world, look how clever I am, but to say to the world, I can't disprove this, can you? And that's the way I describe the scientific method to my students, is we publish in order to get smart people to try to prove us wrong. Because that's the only way we can have any kind of temporary certainty about the validity of our models and our expansion of world knowledge.
Yes.
It's the exact opposite of that certainty that people think scientists have. If you'll pardon my being blasphemous for a moment, I like to say, if you want certainty, then you have to go to religion. If you want to prove things, go to mathematics. If you want to disprove things, go to science. And if you want certainty regardless of being able to prove or disprove, then either join a religion or start one.
Yeah. Beware those that will make objective claims that are unfalsifiable.
Yeah, absolutely. That falsifiability, man, that's the key to the whole shebang, if you'll pardon my technical jargon.
Yeah.
Earlier, you suggested it'd be cool to talk about space travel.
Yes.
And I like the idea that we are now struggling with how much we can trust the systems that we use, right? People don't trust the political system, and that's getting worse and worse in every country in the world. People don't trust mainstream media. People don't trust the medical profession, the scientific profession. And increasingly, the reasons for that are getting better. 20 years ago, if somebody disagreed with the standard medical views on certain things, you could look up what they disagreed about, and really, actually, if you had the ability, you could do some research, fundamental research, and prove their ideas right or wrong, just by doing literary searches in a good medical library, by referring to publications that are out there to establish facts that are accepted by more than one laboratory, that are unrelated or even competing with each other. You could do that kind of thing. These days it's hard because nobody searches in a library anymore unless you've trained them to do it. Instead, they search on Google. And when you search on Google, then you've got an AI for the last year and a bit that's interfering with your search. Now they've even got AI summarizing the search results for you, which is terrifying.
Yeah, and even before then, it was getting incredibly unuseful because it was just showing you the results that had the best search engine optimization.
Exactly. So it was showing you the results that were designed to be recognized in Google, and it was showing you the ones that got hit the most often. the result was that people were finding things that were at the top of Google's list, but not necessarily true. And I think we've all seen stories of this. I've had many experiences of it that I've documented in, I think, earlier episodes and in publications. Here's the problem. We want to do big, real-world projects. Driverless cars, going to space, going to the stars, beyond our own lunar system, beyond our solar system. We want to do these great big projects that are real world and have real world impact. And increasingly, we're training our citizenry to have shorter and shorter attention spans and more blind faith. And blind faith and short attention spans are the opposite of the thoughtful process that makes things safe.
Yes. So I guess you won't be jumping on Elon Musk's Starship to Mars.
I would love to go to Mars. I make no secret of the fact that I was turned down in my astronaut application for the Canadian Space Agency.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to Mars. I'd love to go to the moon. I would love to go beyond Earth's atmosphere and see the planet as a whole.
Good. Well, I'm going to tell you, going to Mars is stupid. Humans should not go to Mars. It is the stupidest idea ever. And
Okay.
I think we need to get beyond this. Try building a colony on Antarctica first before you start trying to go to Mars. What are you doing? People really forget that Mars is 4 billion years behind. It's not just terraforming Mars. Sure, maybe. Expect a 4 billion year cycle to do that. The life kick-started on Earth very quickly after it could on Earth, and it's been going ever since for 4.5 billion years or so. And during that time, the telomere lengths have gotten longer and longer of cells.
Nice.
So there's this legacy of 4.5 billion years, and it's not just humans. Oh, maybe we'll find a planet with oxygen on it. No, you won't find anything in the universe, very likely, that you'll be able to step foot on. The Earth is we are completely adapted for the Earth. We can make small little tin cans that can keep us alive for a little bit, fish bowls, ultimately. Even just keeping an aquarium, a closed aquarium with fish in it, alive takes a lot of energy and resources, and you're constantly putting more elements and resources into that system to keep it alive.
Absolutely. And if anything goes wrong,
yes,
then your need to deliver immediate solutions reliably and spend whatever energy it takes, regardless of what your energy budget is.
yeah,
Right? That suddenly is a requirement that you cannot live without. And I agree. Build communities in the Sahara.
yeah,
Build communities in the deep sea. Build communities in Antarctica. And when they are functioning
yes,
flawlessly,
yes,
which doesn't mean without flaws, it means where all of the flaws are anticipated or corrected instantly. When you've got that, then let's go build tunnels on the moon and stations in the asteroids.
absolutely. If we can do it on our planet, which Project Eden, I think, was one specifically where I think it was in the UK somewhere, where they built that giant glass dome and it fell apart within a few months or so before they needed to cancel it. So it's a hard thing to do, and when you're building glorified fireworks that haven't even gone to orbit yet, and you're saying you're going to be building a colony on Mars, I'll tell you one thing about trust. That's not a system or a person I trust at all.
Right. I'm with you. You talked about institutional trust earlier on in this episode, and if you have that established, whether it's the institution of Mr. Musk's programs, or whether it's the institution of the equipment he's using, or the type of equipment he's using, any of those institutions would allow you to have some trust that you could then build on. It can bootstrap you to trust the other things, to use a term that Lucas was using this morning. Having trust in some things allows you to build up trust in other things, even if you don't know them directly. None of that exists right now for Mars.
Yeah.
And it could. I have some friends who've been involved in some of the attempts to prepare astronauts for living in other atmospheres. Dr. Butler, if you're watching this, howdy. She won't be watching this. But she's been on a few such adventures. I've got some friends, she's Canadian, I've got some friends in Austria who've worked on similar things. I don't think any of them would argue that we're ready for the 4-year or the 40-year version of those experiments. We're just not. And movies like The Martian are novels, a great novel, great movie, much better novel. They give this impression that it would just take a few things by a determined and clever person to turn that space into something you can survive on. I don't believe that's true.
No, it's a kind of survivalist attitude that sure, on Earth there's resources everywhere, but if you look at a picture of the surface of Mars, you will see rocks, dust, rocks, maybe a bit of ice.
Right.
On the North. That's it. You're not, like I say, there's that 4.5 billion years of legacy of resources around us on this planet that just don't exist anywhere else. And even if they do exist anywhere else, they're likely to be dissimilar to us that it's not going to work. Even if you went a couple of million years ago on our planet, you wouldn't fit.
Right.
Even our own planet, when the dinosaurs were roaming around, the atmosphere was a lot denser, I believe, and it was a lot hotter everywhere more around. Even you wouldn't really fit in there. We don't even know if your biology would work to eat the other animals.
And that's an interesting point, right? That is always missed in science fiction, or I shouldn't say missed. It's almost always deliberately ignored in order to be able to frame a story that works, right? But the truth is, on most planets, if you tried to, as they did in The Martian, this is not me being particularly fetishy or weird, if you tried to mix your feces with the soil in order to sprout potatoes and have food to eat, there's nothing in that soil that could provide nutrients. There's nothing in that soil that would combine with your feces to provide nutrients. Chemically, some of the chemicals are there, but the biochemistry, the more complex compounds, probably don't exist on Mars. I'm not sure how they could, in a way that would be compatible with your digestive needs, with the sensitivity of your flesh around digestion. It's a very weird thing.
And I don't think anybody sat down and really thought about what it would mean to be there on that planet. Sure, everyone has a vision of the glory. I'm there, I'm on Mars, I'm on this planet, and the legacy and stories we've told ourselves about that, how great it would be. But if you thought about the reality of the day, it would be absolute hell. Very close to a literal hell. There might be some other humans around you. You're stuck in a closed cabin with them. You want to go for a walk. Maybe you can, but you're going to have to put on this lumpy suit that's basically a spacecraft. And then you can walk and go see dust, rocks, dust.
And when you choose to do that, because you need to get away from these other people, after all, hell is other people. When you choose to do that, you're using resources that belong to everyone. So really, everyone should be able to vote on whether you get to go for a walk or it's someone else's turn, or no one gets to go for a walk because the recycler isn't working particularly well. Yeah, I agree. The complexity is strong, but I disagree that no one's thought about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't say no one's thought about it, and I'm not saying that there are ways that we could do it and that we shouldn't do it. But what I would argue for is what NASA's been doing already. We shouldn't be spending so much energy lumping around our mass and life support systems to go do space exploration. We don't need to. And especially now, as we're building better and better, smaller and smaller systems, like drones, various sorts of drones with sophisticated input devices. And as we can remotely control these better and better, the problem, obviously light speed is a time problem. The future I see eventually, what I'm ultimately about to propose is that we shouldn't lump around all our mass. If we can, all we really care about is consciousness. And sure, there's a hard problem here, it might not be possible, but if we can get our consciousness onto separate devices, smaller devices, silicon devices that don't require anything other than some electrons in a battery, boom, fire them off, explore your universe.
Sure.
A lot less mass. And funnily enough, we had a comment to talk about the Bobiverse from Colin. That is exactly what happens in that book series. Basically, a gentleman's consciousness is uploaded into a probe, and his goal is it's a von Neumann probe to specifically self-replicate and spread humanity out across the galaxy. That's probably where we need to go, but we've done it already. You can go and explore the surface of Mars. I think this is another way I was looking at it. Maybe we don't need to go everywhere. We can bring everywhere to us. So if we can realistically scan surfaces of other planets and get it almost as good as the real thing, you can probably just turn that on and you probably go, okay, cool, yeah, on the surface of Mars. And you'd hang out there and go, this is cool for about 5 minutes and you'd be bored. Because all the interesting stuff is here.
Okay, I agree and I disagree.
Yeah.
Von Neumann probe, cool.
Yeah.
Expanding human consciousness throughout the universe, eventually throughout the planetary system immediately, lovely. As soon as we can do it, we should be doing that. I think that's wonderful.
Before you go anywhere, just let me caveat that sometimes I will take positions I don't completely agree with just for the sake of it. And I'm slightly doing that here.
Okay, cool. So my problem is this. What we should be doing and what we are doing are completely unrelated. And almost always have been and almost always will be, and I'll stand by that. I think it is a human drive. I think it's part of what caused us to evolve, is the fact that we want to look over the next horizon. We want to go where the wild geese may have gone.
To go where no man has gone before.
If you don't mind paraphrasing Vannevar Bush's text to the president in 1957. Yeah, I think it was also used on a television series.
Yeah.
If you're not sure what I'm talking about, ask me sometime.
Or go to episode 4.
The thing is, people want to explore. People want to go beyond what's there. Not everyone, but a significant portion of the human population want to do that. Those folks who want to do that will be inspired to do that. That's not what most corporations want. They don't care. That's not what most governments want. They don't care. It might be what NASA wants, and I hope so, as well as some other space agencies. But what the corporations want, whether it's Elon Musk or someone else, is profit. And there are sure signs of profit out there. If whoever first gets a probe or some kind of vehicle onto an asteroid that can do some mining there is going to totally, if you'll pardon the phrase, disrupt the world economy. As soon as they find more gold somewhere, or more diamonds somewhere, or more plutonium somewhere, or more francium, anything that's rare and unstable in Earth's atmosphere that can be stable or less rare in space, as soon as they find a way to extract it and bring it here, the world's economy is disrupted. So there are folks who want to do that. There are folks who want to control the way that's done by others. There's a lot of pressure from that that's making people want to get out into space. My own desire wouldn't be met by the virtual reality you propose, because I want to go and see our world as a marble. I want that. I want to go and see what the stars look like when there's no atmosphere in the way. And looking at images through Hubble is beautiful, but it's not the same when you can turn your head and actually see them. Will I be satisfied when I can see that? I think I'll be thrilled, but I won't be satisfied. If I can spend enough time living that way, I'll want to see more, and I'm sure other people are the same. But that's not the drive that's driving space exploration for the most part. The drive that's driving space exploration for the most part is this desire to get at the asteroids, to get at Mars, to claim land on the moon, to do these capitalist things, these capital-oriented things that aren't necessarily going to serve anyone well.
That's just, unfortunately, I guess, it's a story of things and reasons why we go and explore in the first place. And you think about our whole period of colonization, the Europeans' colonization was always funded for the whole reason of profiting, profiteering in many ways. And they even going to the moon was to get there before the Soviets.
Right. Purely from a weapon standpoint.
Now, have you ever seen For All Mankind TV series?
No, I have.
And do you know the premise of it?
I do.
Yeah, it's such
maybe say it for that.
It's such a fun premise. It's a TV series. I think Apple produced it, and essentially, the premise of the whole show is that the Soviets got to the moon first, and from there, the space race never ends. And because of that, it gets to the 80s, and we've got moon colonies, and they're about to get to Mars, and essentially that this competitiveness never ended, and it caused us to get to space faster.
The way that we all thought we would.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's another one of those great SF speculative ideas, right? What if this one thing changed, and let's imagine the future that way. Yeah, it's a series I'll watch when I start watching more series, where you could take out the word more.
So one thing I'd like to say with that, two groups of people, well, there's not essentially two groups of people, but the way I see it throughout whole history, this is the way I describe why you have progressive people and conservative people. And I think we've evolved to have a balance of both, because it seems as a system, high-level system, productive to have both. Because if you just think about tribes, a small tribe goes into a location. If it's great and everything's going well, you want a bunch of people there to be conservative and say, hey, things are good. This is all great. But you also want a group of people to say, no, doesn't quite do it for me. I want to go over there and see what's over there. Then you spread out. The people who are progressive and can go away to a new place can walk into a lava field and everything's horrible and they all die. And the conservative people could say, look, we were right. They shouldn't have gone over there. Or the progressive people who walk over and go to somewhere else could have a new lush Eden and a volcano erupts where the people stayed.
Right.
So just as a high-level system, it makes sense to have baked into us progressive and conservative people.
I agree. Do you know Dawkins' selfish gene theory?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is from a book of that name, The Selfish Gene, from '78 or something, by Richard Dawkins, before he became a political figure. And as a geneticist, he was arguing that our genetic structure is actually what's in charge, and these little unconscious bits of our cellular structure are what are driving everything we do, and we're just a continuation of the primordial sea for them to live in. And all of our consciousness and all of our efforts in that are just helping to promote the continued survival of that fishbowl, to use your earlier video. I like that, and I think you've tied it neatly into Darwin's idea of the tidal pools that he witnessed, right? So the fish are here, and then they split into different tidal pools, and maybe one pool dries up, or the original pool dries up, or maybe they both maintain. And you end up with different characteristics in the two pools, and that's how you end up with eventually different species, right? So I love the way you described that just now. I kind of hope, and it's a purely science fictional idea, I kind of hope that we can do that on planets. I kind of hope that there's a future for humanity that goes so far beyond Earth that Earth becomes a myth. And it exists only that way. Yeah, there's so many great science fiction stories have that. The stainless steel rat, for one, Harry Harrison stainless steel rat, which occasionally refers to mud or dirt or something like that, the planet we all supposedly came from. Great series for other reasons as well, but that's just a tiny little bit of the background. I think for people who dream the way I dream, I think that's a necessary dream, to believe that the boundaries aren't here. While we're waiting to be able to survive beyond the boundaries that we currently experience, and I agree we haven't reached that point, but while we're waiting to do that, we should, like you said, push the boundaries here. There was a period in the 70s, after the moon had been reached, when it really looked like all of the same research drive was going to shift to exploring the seas. There was a brief period there when that was really the focus. Cousteau had successfully developed scuba. A number of astronauts were campaigning for the same degree of exploration focus to go into understanding the bottom of the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. I don't understand why that's not happening. And the only reason I can see is the same twofold reason that we've been talking about. They haven't caused people to dream about it. The people who dream, that ability to dream about that hasn't been stirred in people because it's impractical and it's gross and you could just watch it on TV. And the people who are waiting to exploit the capital don't understand how much capital is there.
Yes, or there are eccentric billionaires who cut corners and things go terribly wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately this continues to happen. as we are no doubt in the process of witnessing. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much space travel or observation even is possible if we continue to throw satellites up around the planet.
Well, one of my first contracts was to make animations for a local diving company. And I sat down with the director for a while, and he was talking to me about how all these saturation systems work and getting deep to the bottom of the ocean. And they have the capsules that the divers go down and live in for 2 weeks while they do works on the bottom of oil rigs and such. And he was explaining to me how all the system works, the bell going down, going into these cylinders, high pressurized cylinders to keep everyone alive down there. And I remember one thing he said stuck with me. He said it's easier to get people back from the moon than it is there. And that also terrified me. The thinking of being so close but so far away, just in terms of pressure differences. Because I think when they're down there, they increase the pressure to something about twice the normal atmospheric pressure. So I forget the reasons why, but it's high pressure, saturated pressure down there.
Yeah, it's actually much more than twice.
Yeah.
I think when you go about 6 feet down, you're reaching, I think that's it.
Yeah, no,
folks,
it's for the actual cylinder, the habitats that they have.
Right.
And in there, it's not, it's very close to the same pressure as the outside water, so they can just get in and out. But being that deep, when you breathe in all of that air, the fun way of thinking about it is, I'm going to butcher the mathematics of all of this, but you take a compressed breath of air in. When you go back up to the normal pressure, it's going to expand outwards. That pressure, because when you're deep at the bottom of the ocean, and you take a breath of air in, you have tons and tons and tons of water pressing down on you.
Right.
And that is helping your lungs contain that high pressurized air. When you come back up,
it will
come back and expand. And you also don't just have it in your lungs, you have it in your blood, and then that's what the bends is.
Yeah, exactly. The bends is because nitrogen gets into your blood and then in place of some of the oxygen. Right? I believe that's it. Gosh, I feel terrible about this.
I'm butchering these elements, but
I've done the training for scuba. I've been through the lessons. I've done the math. We had to calculate how deep you could go, and we learned the shelf at which you have to pause to allow your blood to come back to normal before you go the rest of the way out. And definitely, the deeper you go and the longer you stay, the more your body acclimatizes to that pressure.
Yeah.
In the Conrad Stargard books, by the late Leo Frankowski, there's a lovely bit where a 20th century engineer is trying to explain to a medieval knight how atmospheric pressure works. And he's trying to explain that there are a certain number of metric tons of air sitting on top of your shoulders right now. And, well, if that's the case, wouldn't it squash me flat? Well, no, because you've got the same number of tons pushing you from all sides. If you were to go and walk under the sea, however, and here the guy gets very upset. Okay, first you're saying I'm going to be crushed by the air, and now you're saying I can walk under the sea? It becomes a fun argument.
Yeah, and that's the other reason why you can't go out into a vacuum, is also because your body's structured rigidly for 1 atmosphere of pressure. And when you go into a vacuum, turns out your structure wants to press out against itself much more than you think.
Yeah, vacuum does that. The differences in temperature in space when you don't have an insulating atmosphere around you do that. If you're facing the sun on one side and the cold away from the sun on the other side, the dimorphism can be horrible. Zero gravity is really bad for humans. I remember reading about this a couple of decades ago and thinking it would be really cool to develop an exercise routine for the small, unconsciously controlled stabilizing muscles in our joints, including our hips and our spine, to try and help keep those muscles from atrophying when a person is not under gravity. Because everyone who spends a prolonged period of time in orbit suffers from this. They suffer from loss of bone density, but a loss of muscular acuity, muscular density as well. We're not made for it. And a silicon chip would be much better in space than a human would, as per your earlier statement.
But I do love a lot of the sci-fi stories where humans kind of evolved to adapt into space. And it kind of, I can't remember what series it is, but there's these kind of monkey people where we evolve hands back on our feet because it's very useful to move around. June, I guess, has the spacing guild and the navigators. Navigators are basically giant brains hooked up on spice that float around in 0G and navigate between the stars.
Yeah. Now, navigation between the stars is another thing that just fascinates me. Science fiction always tries to find shortcuts to it, ways to explain it. Imagine going at any speed and hitting the smallest fragment of something as hard as the shell you're in.
Yeah.
Right.
This is another thing that, interstellar travel is,
It's just
nobody thinks about it. This is why the realistic ships that make sense in sci-fi, or not sci-fi, but people have proposed and talked about, you can't have interstellar travel without a massive shield on the front of the ship.
Whether the shield is something you generate, which we can do a little bit now, but not very well, or whether the shield is something that's generated by your movement, right?
Or it's just a literal piece of metal really, really thick in front of your ship.
Which slows you down and causes all kinds of impacts on the Newtonian physics of trying to move through space. But you have to have something, right?
Yeah.
Then you get the what is it called? Straw in a hurricane problem, where a blade of straw, dried grass straw, not drinking straw, can be embedded in the trunk of a tree by a hurricane.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to travel between stars, you're going to have to move a lot faster than the wind in a hurricane. So anything striking you is going to strike you like that. Even the smallest thing becomes a bullet.
Well, that reminds me of, the Apollo astronauts, when they were traveling to the moon, they kept seeing bright flashes.
Yeah.
They all reported it, but none of them mentioned it to each other until they got back and they kind of felt brave enough to talk about seeing these weird bright flashes in space. And it turned out they were interstellar particles that were penetrating the ship and hitting their retina such that it made a flash, perceivable flash. And they didn't figure out what that was. There was a proposal of what that was. They didn't figure it out until they could get electron microscopes and look at the hull of the ships, but also their spacesuits. And on the visor, they could see this massive spike of where this particle had penetrated and gone through the spacesuit.
That's astounding. An actual spike there.
Yeah. A physical spike. You can see it's just this physical problem broken in. Which is fun. Everyone forgets about that's another thing, radiation. You're protected by lots of things on the Earth. It's atmosphere, but also its magnetic field, which completely protects you from that giant fusion reactor in the sky.
Mostly protects you.
Mostly protects you. Put sunscreen on.
You can still get skin cancer.
Yeah.
Yes, do put sunscreen on. You ever read the Fantastic Four? I'm waiting for the new Marvel movie. I'm looking forward to it. Fantastic Four were among my heroes when I was a kid because they were scientists and they were interested in each other as humans primarily and helping others primarily. I thought all that was cool, the idea of a family of adventurers, lovely idea. But they got their powers by trying to be the first ones in space and getting bombarded with radiation. I'm willing to pay that price.
All right, Mr. Fantastic.
I don't even care if I end up as the Thing. Some people would say it wouldn't be much of a change. If my ability to go to space means that I have to spend the rest of my life as a superhero, I'm willing to do it. I will make that sacrifice.
Well, my point was going more to how difficult space travel really would be.
Real, not fictional.
Yeah. No, and just in terms of the radiation, even on Mars as well, you're going to be bombarded with a lot more radiation than you should. It turns out, though, to actually protect yourself properly, I think you only need a thin layer of water, and you're all right in space if you have a thin layer of water in your hull of your ship.
Just because it diffracts the radiation?
It just absorbs radiation very well. So you'll see in nuclear power plants, they have the core, sitting at the bottom. And I saw, it was the What If guy, SKCD.
Monroe.
Yeah, was explaining, he got asked a question, what if you swam in the pool of those places? And it turns out you'd be absolutely fine. You could swim down even quite a bit, and it's because it's an exponential drop-off. So where the core those high radiated cores are, it's an exponential drop off. So only like a meter or so away from it, you'll find in water, because water absorbs so much. If you think about, I mean, you think about how dense it is in atoms, like it makes sense.
Is it Daniel Monroe?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry if it's not. Fantastic. That's from one of his What If books?
Yeah, it was, or it was a YouTube video recently, at least.
Okay. Great resource, that guy is. Hilarious and knowledgeable and willing to learn things in order to share them.
Just as a premise, as a book as well, like take on the most ridiculous questions and run them through.
Yeah, such a great idea. If you haven't read those books, I suggest it. And if you haven't seen those cartoons, I suggest it.
Oh, yeah.
Both are well worth.
So the problem.
Sorry, Randall.
Randall.
Not Daniel. Randall.
Obviously, the problem with bringing up water as a shield is, as good as a shield it is, it has a lot of mass.
Yeah.
But could also double as your drinking water? Probably, at least for cooling and washing things.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's not a bad premise to work from. Then, if we know that works, then maybe it should be scuba divers we're sending to space.
Maybe that's another. I remember in the Culture series, I talked about the Culture series specifically. There was one interstellar ship, massive ship with a whole civilization on it, and the majority of it was all water-based conscious life. So this person had to like rearrange his cells and everything so he could fit in, and he floating around in this giant, massive water ship.
Isn't that cool? I mentioned David Brin, who wrote the practice effect, the dimension where entropy doesn't work and instead practice makes perfect. I think it was his work as well. I think it was the Sun Diver series, but I could be wrong, where he has humans going to space with dolphins.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and the dolphins are just better at navigating and things like that than we are.
Oh, and deep three-dimensional space. Yeah, that's good.
So this is a world where they've had a chance to develop extended communications and eventually partnerships. And so you get on board one of these particular vessels, and it's salt water. And that's how you live while you're there, because it's their environment. It's created for them.
That reminds me, here's a fun fact. Do you know that, this is my what if questions I asked myself one day. I might have already talked to you about it, but I just one day was thinking about dolphins and whales. I'm like, hold on, they're mammals. What do they drink? Well, they're in the water. They must just drink seawater. And then I was like, but they can't drink seawater. So I Googled it, and nobody knows. Nobody's quite sure what cetaceans drink and where, and if they just drink salt water or not.
Weird, huh?
What?
Yeah, you'd think that's something we'd care about.
Yeah.
If they've got a method of intaking salt water and excreting enough salt that it doesn't kill them or make them sick or damage their internal organs, that would be cool.
It would be cool. So another theory is that they just go to the mouths of rivers and drink and head off. It turns out manatees actually do that. People in Florida will leave hoses in the water, and they'll come up and they'll drink the fresh water. So,
but manatees live next to freshwater sources.
Yeah.
Whales and dolphins live everywhere.
They do.
Well, I don't know about everywhere, but they live over vast areas.
It's interesting. We don't know the exact answer.
Yeah, there's so much we don't know about the sea. We should be exploring the sea. Yeah, I kind of wish I'd focused on that instead of astronauts. Maybe I'd be doing it now. Probably not. I was rejected for good reason. Yeah, it is strange though. There's so much going on, and yes, there's vast areas of the planet we've never looked at. There's vast areas of the planet we can't see directly, we can't experience directly. That's true. But there are animals who go there all the time and come back
and have conscious experience. For sure. I completely disagree. Anybody who says that other animals don't have a conscious experience, I think that's completely ludicrous, and I will fight anyone on that. So what I really want to know is, what on earth is it like to be a whale? Like, the echolocation, being in just this vast void space, but being able to talk to other entities miles and miles away through sub-frequency, and being able to experience your three-dimensional surroundings through sonar. And the dolphins specifically have larger cerebellums than we do, which we know is related to what, I think? Okay,
no, we
well,
don't.
we don't.
No, we don't.
We
don't.
think, maybe.
A lot of people think that having a larger brain means more intelligence.
No,
It
no,
does not.
specifically cerebellum, not brain in general. The part of the brain that we think is more related to social. I'm betraying. I'm not a neurosurgeon, and I'm not going to.
I'm not a neurosurgeon either,
Not
but
a
I played one on
neuroscientist.
television.
Sorry.
The cerebellum is sort of where all your muscle memory is going
Right,
on, right? That's where the reflexes you've learned to use together as patterns can be triggered from there. And
Okay.
and so it seems to me from my studies, and I'm probably out of date and I'm probably wrong, and it wouldn't be the first time today, but it seems to me that what's going on there is that's the place where the patterns are stored.
Okay, so what I would say is, forget the brain. Let's not even talk about the brain. You can just look at a dolphin and look at its behavior, and you can probably see that this is a smart being.
Oh, no doubt.
You see the fact that they love the wakes on the front of the ships, and they have no reason to do it other than it looks like they're having a hell of a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the same thing with crows.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've told you before about the lovely study that was trying to count cod numbers. Did I tell you about that?
No.
So they put a little food trap, and it basically, if you swam against it, it released a bit of food. And then what they wanted to do was they wanted to count the fish swimming against it and get an idea of the number of cod in that region of the sea. What they found instead was that the cod formed a circle and swam against it, and the next one ate the food and swam against it. The next one ate the food, and they'd circle around and feed each other continually until the trap was empty or they got bored. That kind of play-type behavior goes on all the time in so many creatures.
Yeah.
And I don't know about advanced intelligence. I don't know if they're clever enough to put themselves in mortgage slavery.
I never said intelligence.
No.
Oh,
I'm playing devil's advocate as well here. But I do believe that the ability to play is a sign of intelligence.
Okay.
I believe that. I believe that the ability and desire to play, because it shows an intent, conscious or otherwise, to learn, to develop new skill. Mm-hmm. And I think that's foundational in pretty much every animal. I can't speak about mollusks. I don't know if...
Do spiders play?
I don't know. I know that they eat ladybugs and ladybugs eat them. But, what they get up to in their own time is up to them.
Yeah, and I guess if they were playing, it would be too far removed from us for us to just intuitively tell that it's playing. With mammals, we're close enough, we can intuitively immediately tell when an animal's playing. You look at any young animals, a goat jumping around all giddy, it's playing.
Yeah,
a puppy.
And then a group of them doing it together and chasing each other and coming up with new games on the spot.
It looks exactly the same as children playing. Yeah. So that's close enough to us where we can intuitively just go, they're playing.
Yeah, and I think what's going on there is the same process. Yeah. Their brain is growing and they're trying to figure out patterns of things, and the way you figure out patterns of things is by repeating actions and predicting what change happens and then learning from the change you didn't predict, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting reinforcement and you're learning where the reinforcement doesn't work, getting negative reinforcement there. Building connections in your
I guess my point there, though, was that we can immediately just glance at mammals and tell where they're playing, but then I guess we wouldn't understand what a small spider would be doing to play.
I guess, I don't know. I haven't spent enough time with spiders.
At least intuitively, just to glance.
Yeah, or at least not the young ones.
It's foreign to us. Yeah. I'm sure there are people who've studied their behavior a lot and could immediately tell us.
We have pretty good information that octopods play, right? And we have pretty good information that sharks play and killer whales. Though I guess they're, anyway, I think a lot of different creatures play. It's possible that worms play. I don't know. I don't know what they have in terms of
I don't know. My hunch is that for some reason I feel like it's less likely to.
Yeah. I think less likely is a really good way to say it.
Yeah.
Just because of the density and number of neurons involved.
Yeah. So that's where now I'd certainly say consciousness, I think runs deep in likely a lot of animals. Where is the cutoff? Is there a cutoff? Is there a diffuse ramp of experience that kind of drops off to the point where certainly for lumps of matter, probably a rock doesn't have consciousness, but a fly? I mean, you could look at a fly as a complete mechanized system. There's a wee animal, I think we completely explained some worm, where we understand all of its neurons and everything, and it's like we've kind of made a complete system.
Flagellum, I think.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
We can look at it, we can completely explain that system.
Yeah.
Does it have consciousness? I don't know.
No, we cannot measure it.
Consciousness, a lot of people get confused and say, what are you talking about? No, I'm not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about experience. Is it something to be like that thing?
Right. Not that it thinks well, but that it thinks.
And what would the most basic level of conscious experience be like? Maybe it would just be bright, nice, bright, cool, dark.
Maybe. I mean, people talk about plants that way, right? Mm-hmm. If a plant moves towards light, moves away from too much light, absorbs water is necessity, but too much water will kill it, and so it reacts. It shrinks in places, it grows in places, it responds to its environment and to the things around it. Hard to see that as not being consciousness. You can go back to the ancient Greeks and see versions of that, right, where they talk about plant consciousness versus human consciousness. Like, I think it was Aristophanes, I think it was Plato who said that.
I'm not sure that's to that.
Yeah, neither am I, but could be wrong, wouldn't be the first time today. But they talked about that idea of plant consciousness versus animal consciousness.
Yeah, so it also gets down to panpsychism, which is a fun foundational proposal of what goes on, because the way we currently and generally think is that consciousness at some point pops up further right. When you have some sort of sophisticated information processing system, consciousness appears, which is just a leap of faith and a jump, as maybe consciousness is fundamental to the universe and it builds up when you have the right systems.
Either way, it's a religious belief, it's not a scientific belief.
And the weird question is, could it ever be a scientific belief? Could it ever be scientific? And this is a hard problem of consciousness, is that the qualia of experience is very hard to objectively observe, because you can't objectively observe experience, qualia experience, what it actually feels like. We can measure the results of experience, but we can never really measure or observe direct experience of somebody else. Now, your own experience is the one thing you can do. It's what Descartes ultimately said.
Right.
I think, therefore I am. The ultimate truth, ground truth that you know is that you have experience, and everything else can be a demon deceiving you, but you know that you have experience. The hard part is you can never experience anything anybody else has, except art. This is where I come. I think art is our attempts at making other humans experience what you experience.
Lovely. I think that's a great interpretation, a great definition. The idea that you can't experience what other people experience otherwise, or that you can't quantify the quality.
Can't observe it directly.
There we are.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Not experience, because we can all go see a film and feel probably something similar whilst we watch it. But what I mean here is objectively observe that experience. You can observe its results. Well, not its results. Its
impact.
Its impact. So yes, you can't directly observe experience in other people. You can directly observe your own experience, but you can't directly observe experience in other beings, conscious beings.
Nice.
So that's my point of the hard, that's not my point, but that is the hard problem of consciousness. We might not ever be able to do that. But like I say, I think art is our attempt at making a point about what it is to be you. I think art is that. Art is trying to make other conscious beings experience your experience.
Very nice. I like that idea very much. I would use that. I think that's good. I don't know if there's others. And I don't know which kind of art works better for some people than for others. But I do know that the model I built when trying to model interaction of humans with the world, rather than being based on how the brain works, is based on how we interact, the measurable things that we do. And precisely for that reason. we don't have an idea of where learning takes place. We don't have an idea of where a thought happens. We don't know what a thought is or how to measure it, but we can measure the speed at which people react. We can measure the ways in which they react, the different cognitive processes they can use at different speeds. So that's what those models for me are based on.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other experiential things that could be modeled in similar ways, but try as I might, I cannot find a way to bring that back to space travel.
Ha! Well, it was trust originally.
Right. Oh, sorry. Well, trust makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
If you cannot experience the actual thoughts of someone else, how do you know whether or not to trust them?
Why do we have social sciences at all? Is we have a lot of trust in that the behaviors we're observing and the answers that people are giving, we can trust them. We have to, because we can't directly observe them.
Right. That idea that we have to trust one another is beautiful. I think that's what's going to get us to the stars, is the ability to trust one another. The inability to do so, as you said earlier, this idea of the rugged individual, that's how you die. That's how you die alone. The ability to continue and survive in weird environments only comes if you're working with weird people.
Yes. So let's reach out for that branch on the stars, give it a little shiggle, see if our spaceships are not going to explode on takeoff. That'd be nice. I'm still feeling like, personally, that branch is a little wobbly for me. I'm probably not going to be jumping in any of those spacecraft anytime soon. I'll let some other people jump on those branches first before I go anywhere. Right. But if you have trusted us enough to listen this long, we greatly appreciate it, as always. Thank you for coming on this fun ride of tangents, as usual, but we hope you got something out of it. And we will see you next time.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye. SocTalk is a production from the Robert Gordon University School of Computing.
Today's episode was brought to you by the letter pi and the number pi.